Let's briefly look at what we did last week. We answered these two questions. We looked at several metaphysical questions, and we looked at this. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is stuff here in the first place? Why do we have anything rather than just nothingness? Why does stuff exist? And then, why is this stuff that exists in motion rather than standing still? And we talked about the incredible motion from the atomic level of electrons going near the speed of light around the nucleus of an atom, all the way to galactic movements, and how planets and moons are orbiting on their axis and rotating, and moons are rotating around the planets, and planets are rotating around the stars, and the stars are moving among each other. And there's this incredible, powerful movement behind everything. And we talked about the whole idea of cause and effect. And if I take this 10-pound metal ball and I throw it out into the audience, good catch. That's cause, that's effect. I'm throwing something and you can get up and get it. That's okay, good catch, no problem. We'll work with you. I'm going to try to hit some of these $10,000 lenses on these $1 million cameras. Now you're going to be getting to throw these back to me in a little while. Oh, the youth over there, they'll love it. They'll give them some extras. So what's happening is I am propelling these with the force from me. It's acting on the ball, and it's landing somewhere else. So let's say those were darts of Satan, the enemy, throwing all kinds of fiery darts of doubt and disbelief and fear and worry and anxiety and pride and greed and lust and anger. And he's throwing those things at you. And what I want you to do is picture me for a moment, and I know it'll be very difficult, but picture me as the devil for a moment. It's very difficult to do, isn't it? Now, 2 Corinthians tells us that Satan can appear as an angel of light. He brings his lies and his deceptions very subtly. And his most recent attack on the very existence of God and the nature of God and the goodness of God and the truth of Jesus Christ has been modernism and postmodernism, is what we're talking about for a couple of weeks. And he doesn't appear to you and say, "Hello, I am Satan. I'm the enemy of the living God. I'm here to destroy your life and cast you into hell forever. Come on, follow me." He doesn't appear to you that way. No one in their right mind, other than, as I've said before, a few heavy metal musicians, they're not going to follow that guy. So now, why do we have corporate prayer on the first Tuesday of every month? He's thrown these individual darts at you. Now, what I want you to do is when I say, "These foul Christians doth curse me," I want you to fire those back at me as prayer all at once. And it will show you the power of corporate prayer and how we can lift one another up. And this is cause and effect in the spiritual world. And so here's the enemy, and he's thrown these things at you. And we get together and we corporately pray, and he goes, "These Christians doth curse me." You see, the corporate prayer, and it chases him out of our lives of one another. We lift each other up in prayer. Now, young ladies, while I talk, would y'all mind gathering these up here and putting them in the vase for me? Is that cool? I have to get your parent's signature to be on the film, I guess, but that's okay. Yeah, that was a powerful prayer. It's lucky that God performed a miracle and turned them into foam. I didn't think about the effects of steel balls. Good, thank you. So, let's look again now. Last week, we answered these two questions. What we realize is that the whole universe is dying, right? It's either going to expand into nothingness, universal entropy, get cold, and die, or it's going to collapse back on itself in what's called hot crunch death, right? One way or another, the universe is destined to die. The Bible refers to this as the creation's bondage to decay. Even 2,000 years ago, the Bible wrote about the knowledge that the universe was dying long before we were able to do this through astrophysical cosmology. And so now we can see already some hint that the Bible is pretty divinely inspired. And so we concluded that either the cold death, the expansion death, ultimate entropy, or the collapse, hot crunch death, and that universal motion, that everything's moving, had to have some force outside of the universe to get everything started. We concluded that the universe had to have a beginning, and that that beginning was from outside of itself. So already we've eliminated all forms of atheism, all forms of agnosticism. We've really even eliminated what's called pantheism, which is this idea that God is just the sum total of all that is, and that there's like this new sphere of consciousness, and that there's one consciousness, and everything that exists makes that up. And pantheism says you take all the parts of the universe, and somehow there's a spiritual counterpart. It's a half-truth, one of those subtle lies of the enemy. But we've really eliminated pantheism also because we know the universe was begun from a force outside of itself. Christians know that God is totally present, what we call the immanence of God. He's right here with us. But we also know He's transcendent, above and beyond this universe He's created. And science tells us that's the nature of God. We read it in the Bible 2,000 years ago, all the way in the New Testament, and even further back than then in the Old Testament. We read about God's immanence and transcendence, His presence here, and yet His otherness in the fact that He is above this creation. Yet now science tells us the same thing. This God, whatever He or it or she is, and we'll be getting into that in the future weeks, but we do know there's a God outside that created everything. COBE is a special satellite, and what it does is it explores. It's known as the background explorer. That's where it gets its name, Cosmic Background Explorer. And it's been measuring temperatures and measuring temperature estimates throughout the universe. And there are certain conclusions that you reach by those temperature measurements. And lo and behold, when COBE gave us the results of its temperature measurements, Stephen Hawking himself, the guy who wrote all the books about the first 6 seconds of time and how tried to come up with a naturalistic explanation, that is, an explanation apart from God. Dr. Stephen Hawking himself of Cambridge University, when these results came in, he said, this is the discovery of the century. Because what COBE showed us is that through these temperature measurements across the universe, we know it hasn't been here forever. The same thing entropy tells us. And of course, truth is truth. And anytime science objectively, without prejudice, looks into the truth, without false assumptions and false presumptions, anytime science does that, the conclusions will match. Entropy or cold expansion death of the universe or hot crunch death both say the universe couldn't have been here forever, because if it had, it would already be dead. So we know it had a beginning point. And so when we do these temperature measurements, we're going to have the same results. And indeed, we did. So much so that Stephen Hawking himself said this is the discovery of the century. And also the Hubble telescope. The Hubble's telescope, and I won't get into great detail, but measured the ratio of what are called exotic particles, these special kinds of cosmic particles in the universe. And the ratios compared to the more natural particles, same result. The Hubble telescope said the same thing. The ratio is such that we know there was a starting point to the universe. All of this stuff comes together. And so from last week and this little additional information, we now know the universe